Hello, RP people. Before I get started, I just wanted to say thank you to Free League. You've been absolutely fantastic. And to commemorate this fantastic moment of me and Nils joining together for one episode, we've decided to run a one shot of Free League. Now, what product we're using? Well, that's up to you guys. So hop onto our Discord, the link will be in the description below, and pick which Free League product you'd want. We have a poll going until the November 21st. Hello, RP people, and welcome back to another episode of Role Playing as Smart People, and the series I like to call
One on
One
One with Santa.
Yeah. Joining me today, I have Nils Karlen from Free League Publishing. Hello.
Hello, nice to be here. Calling from
Oh,
Stockholm.
oh, quite a distance away for that. But I'm very glad you can be here. So for anyone who's not familiar with you, Nils, would you be able to tell us a little bit about how you got into the tabletop hobby to begin with?
Sure. For me, it started with my dad back in the early '80s, and he used to buy these Avalon Hill Hex Encounter war games. And one day he came home, I think it was Christmas '82, with a blue box, which was called Drakar och Demoner, which is basically the D&D of Sweden. It's a different game, but it's kind of similar. And we tried it. I was 5 years old, and I was basically instantly hooked. And since I was a kid, I've been playing RPGs and other games for the rest of my life. And now I work with them full time. So it's kind of gone full circle. So thanks, Dad.
Oh, that that's awesome. That's awesome. Is that you recently released another RPG, and I remember reading that it is like your traditional D&D. Was it pretty much?
Yes, it is that one. We actually we bought the brand a year ago, so now we own. It's called Drakar och Demoner in Swedish, or Dragon Bane is our translation of it, because we couldn't have names similar to Dungeons and Dragons. That would be foolish.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, so we're making that game now and trying to modernize this old Swedish classic and also bring it to the international scene.
Yeah, I remember looking at the page for that, and that had, I remember, a really beautiful kind of green hue to the art, and I really liked that art style that you had in that.
Yeah, and that kind of the green hue actually goes back to the cover of the second RPG edition that came out in '84, and that cover was the famous Elric cover by Michael Whelan. I'm not sure if you've seen it, with Elric of Melnibone and having his black sword against a green sky.
Oh,
So
that's
that's
awesome.
kind of, yeah. So that was the iconic Drakar och Demoner cover from the '80s. So this our new green kind of tone of the game is just a callback to that image, basically.
Oh, I love that. I love when people take like homage of the old art and put it into the new. I find
Yeah,
it just
yeah,
so beautiful looking.
yeah.
um, so I know you're currently working on you have a Kickstarter out right now called Year Zero Zone Wars. As a war gamer
That's right.
myself, especially since I saw the name Andy Chambers, I was extremely excited to see that. And the fact that it's running actually Mutant Year Zero, which is it is an amazing game, and has a setting that really kind of differentiates itself from a lot of different mutant game, like mutant
Yeah,
based
yeah,
games.
yeah.
But for the audience who might not know about the setting, would you be able to
Hmm?
talk a little bit about it?
Sure. Actually, it kind of ties back into the story I told about Drakar och Demoner, because in the '80s, it was called in Swedish Mutant, or Mutant, of course. That was the second game. That was the sister game of Drakar och Demoner. So it started out as kind of in a game inspired by Gamma World, but with a different Nordic twist to it. And it was written by the same authors that later on went on to write the horror game Cult. Um, and the kind of the setting is, it's in the original game. It's set in Scandinavia after the apocalypse, and it's this kind of pre-industrial society where you have mutated animals, you have psionic mutants, you have robots, and lots of strange phenomena kind of competing for power in the zone and discovering old artifacts and discovering the ruins of the old society. So that was kind of the classic mutant. And what we did in 2014 was we rebooted it and called it Mutant Year Zero. And we actually took the timeline some ways back, so it was a bit more raw, a bit more post-apocalyptic, um, and that's a setting we've been exploring in a bunch of different books. We've been exploring the mutated animals, the robots, the frozen humans, and so on, and kind of built this setting from these pieces. And it's I would describe it as probably a mix of very dark post-apocalypse mixed with humorous, anthropomorphic strangeness. Uh, so it's not a one-note game. It's not grimdark. It has a lot of humor in it, but it's also very kind of brutal. But lots of strange wackiness, and that's actually why we thought it was a good fit for a war game, because of that, because it had this humor and it had this kind of brutality to it, which I think fits quite well around a tabletop.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true, and I don't think there's enough. I'm trying to think if there's any that really focus on mutants for skirmish games, and I can't really think of any
It's
off the
not
top of
no,
my
it's not
head.
that many. I think it's a few small ones, but I mean, it's no, not that I
No,
know at least.
yeah, it was. I was trying to do some research ahead of time just to try and figure out, was Mutant Year Zero your Free League's first RPG?
In English, yeah,
Oh, okay.
it was our international debut, but we actually did a game, actually two games in Swedish before that. But Mutant was our first game we translated, and that was together with Modifius, the UK
Mhm.
based publisher. So yeah, it's kind of our first game in that sense,
Oh, okay.
and
Yeah,
it
because
yeah.
I was thinking, I was like, it's kind of interesting, and I was wondering because that was my impression that it was the first one. And now I know it's in English, but did you almost plan it to have your first real skirmish game be the same as your first international RPG? Was that planned?
No, that was actually a total coincidence. I haven't even thought about it until you said it now. But I mean, it makes sense, I guess. It's kind of full circle.
Yeah.
I think what we looked at was we liked kind of the balance of, you have some kind of humor in there and you have the darkness. So it has both things. Where we have other IPs, but some of them are more like, for example, Simbarum is a game we have. It's very dark. It's very moody, and that's super cool. But we wanted to have this lightness as well in this
Mhm.
war game. So I think that's why. Also, I mean, it's cool to have miniatures of mutated rabbits and pigs and so on.
Yeah, I saw the duck and I was thinking of the video game that was released on Mutant Year Zero, and I was like, oh my god, I think that's the same duck. And
Yeah,
the
it is. It is. Yeah,
yeah,
we
I
we
gotta
we
say,
we
oh, go ahead.
we. No, it worked a little bit with the video game. It wasn't we that did it, of course, but we wrote some lore and so on, and then we got to use their kind of the models for the game, and we thought that the duck and the boarmin, we thought it was cool, so we wanted to integrate them into this game. So yeah, it's the same duck.
Okay, yeah, I gotta say the models that I've seen, they look really really nice. Like and I was reading some of the comments, and a lot of people wanted those models. They just look absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, we were very happy with them. Actually, I mean, we worked with two sculptors that we hadn't worked with before, but I think they really brought them to life. I mean, we gave them some kind of general instructions of what kind of vibe we wanted, but they created them from scratch. So I think it's great work from the sculptors.
Oh yeah, absolutely amazing. So what made you guys decide to get into the war game skirmish game market? Was it just an urge that you wanted to fill, or
Yeah, basically, I think it was curiosity. We're obviously tabletop role-playing gamers
Mhm.
first and foremost, and publishers. But a few years back, we started to kind of explore skirmish games. Personally, me and some other guys are working. And for me, I've never been a big tabletop war gamer in my life. Really, I've been much more casual. But we discovered we tried a lot of different games, and we discovered that there's so much fun to be had with this kind of emergent narrative that skirmish games are great at creating. That's kind of related to RPGs, even though it's totally different. So we thought it would be fun to explore that and maybe kind of see what kind of crossover potential we could find with traditional RPGs. So we wanted to try and make a narrative or a tabletop skirmish game that's big on narrative and is really creating these emergent stories at the table that create these kind of laugh out loud moments and cinematic action pieces. So it was we wanted to try to do that and try also to make a game. I wanted to make a game that we couldn't find out in the market, which didn't require you to be a hobbyist from the beginning. So
Oh.
lots of games. If you play GV or Infinity or whatever, they're great games often, but they
Mhm.
require you to collect, paint, build terrain, build lists, which is a great thing to do. It's a great part of the hobby. But we wanted to make a game that kind of takes the fun and makes it more accessible. So that's
Okay.
why we have one piece miniatures. We have them sun dropped. We want to have terrain in the box. We have a game mat, uh, everything needed to play uh, in the box. So it's kind of that was a vision with the game as well.
Oh, that's actually that's interesting because even when I was looking at your Kickstarter, for one thing, it's really, really reasonably priced. Was your intention to actually try and draw in people who normally wouldn't have
Yeah,
went for a
yeah. I
skirmish game?
mean, yeah, kind of. I mean, it's always a balance because making these kind of games are really expensive, of course,
Oh
and
yeah.
especially with plastics. But we want to. I mean, and Kickstarter is the first part, but we also wanted to make a game that could, uh, be reasonably priced in retail later on, because I see loads of these Kickstarter games that are really filled to the brim with cool stuff with plastics, and then they get to retail and it costs like $150 to buy, and it's kind of like, who has that kind of money to buy for a game? It's not accessible. So that's why we're trying to do something that's a little bit more easy to just buy a box and play with your nephews or whatever, or bring out on, I don't know, Christmas Eve. Um, Maybe not Christmas; it's too complicated. But yeah, so it's accessibility has always been like one of the main goals of all the games we make. Actually, we try
Mm,
to make them not too rules heavy, not too prep heavy. So it, trying to do that with this game as well, without losing. It shouldn't be dumbed down. It should still have some good core design and good you should have lots of decisions to make when you play.
yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I also noticed while I was reading the rules that it seems like you're embracing the random, which is something that a lot of war games try and mitigate to some extent. Was this
Yeah,
part of the design philosophy?
it was. Yeah, actually, we wanted to kind of embrace as it's we wanted to capture the tone of Mutant Year Zero, and in Mutant Year Zero you have these strange mutations, you have this strange phenomena that pops up in the zone, and we wanted to kind of embrace the chaos a little bit, and not work towards a game that is like 100% balanced in every way, but instead create a game that creates really good narrative and fun moments without losing. It shouldn't be totally unbalanced as well, but that wasn't the prime design goal. The prime design goal was a game that tells good stories and you laugh when you play. Um, so yes, we kind of chose to in certain parts to embrace the chaos, but then again, we play tested this a lot, and I mean sometimes it gets too much chaotic, so we have to tone down certain parts. Um, so it's a balance, but yeah.
Was it hard to find that balance, or did it kind of just come naturally while you were playtesting?
It's kind of came naturally. I mean, we play tested a bunch of the variations that kind of broke down when we tried some implementations of rules and cards, and it was pretty easy to see what worked and what didn't work. When you play it instead of writing it.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was pretty easy. It's always, I mean, a game that builds, as we use cards quite a lot in this game. You have these zone cards, and you have mutations you can use, and you find artifacts, which can be like it can be a plasma cannon, but it could also be like a broken bicycle. Um, it's kind of so you have these cards bring the narrative to the game, but they also bring the element of chaos. So
that
yeah.
that's hilarious. Like honestly, I was not expecting you to say a broken
No, it,
bicycle there.
no, that's actually a big part of the game experience, because in most scenarios you're fighting over these artifacts. That's kind of the scenario points, but
Yeah.
you don't know what they are until you run up to them and investigate them. So you could be fighting over a thing, and then you go when you find it, you're really happy, and you find a vacuum cleaner, and and you could either and all of these artifacts have like a victory point total.
Hmm.
So, for example, a vacuum cleaner uh, maybe worth like 1 point, and it's not that much. But if you find, for example, automatic carbine or something, it's worth a lot. Um, and the better ones, if you use them, they can also break. So there's always like you have to make a choice if do I want to use this powerful weapon and potentially lose my victory point, or should I just like hold on to it? So the whole game around the artifacts and the victory points is partly about finding cool stuff, but also partly about finding crap stuff and throwing the crap stuff at the enemy, which you can do, by the way. You can throw stuff which you find.
Oh, that's awesome. I've always wondered why more more uh more games haven't really taken the vet like taken that and using like I'm trying to think of how to word this right now. Really taking like the terrain and the objects on the ground and figure out a way how to use that like through throwing things, hitting people with rocks.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
that
yeah.
that sounds I that
But
that
that's another way to bring like narrative to the game. It's just not like it's not a victory point. It's not like a objective. It's something more. It is an actual thing you want, but you don't know what it is, and you also get this kind of humor where you don't know it until you investigate it. So you could be fighting over worthless things, and you could have another player finding a real treasure around the corner. So this is an uncertainty in it, but you still know it's worth something. So they're not worth anything. I mean,
yeah.
zero.
And that's a really smart way to actually do it because a lot of war games, I find a lot of people are either worried about two things: is the cost, or they don't really want to learn the tactics and watch YouTube videos on learning how to play this game and how to be competitive. And this, it sounds like you're
Mm.
winning is not necessarily the end goal. It's really just telling the story. And I think that's a really smart move to differentiate yourself from a lot of games.
Yeah, I mean, you want to win as well. So it's not a game you play to lose, but yes, I would say it's fun. It's a game where you still can have quite a lot of fun, even though your little squad is annihilated by some sand eating worm or something. So stuff happens, but it's a balance of making. We don't want to have the chance element to totally screw over the players. You don't want to
Mhm.
draw a card and it says you're dead. That's super boring. So we want to try to balance that with what's fun for the player as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Is there any mechanics in the game that you're especially proud of?
I think Well, two things actually. I think first of all that it's designed for multiplayer action at the start. That's actually one thing. When we played, we played a lot of games the last years. Most skirmish games are built for two players for
Hmm.
obvious reasons. You know, balance reasons being one, but also it's much easier to write scenarios and so on. But we found when we played that we had more fun when we played 3 or 4 players, even though the game wasn't balanced for that. So when we set out to make this game, we had that as a design goal to make this like being able to play multiplayer from the start. So you could have this like, for example, if you're 4 people and you're about to play, I don't know, D&D or something, and or 5 people and someone doesn't turn up, you could just break this out and play instead. So it's a bit more viable as a party game in that sense. So I like the multiplayer aspect. It works great at 2 player as well, but you can play 3 or 4. But I think game mechanics wise, I think the initiative system is probably I think the most interesting part, and that's Andy Chambers' invention, which is, well, maybe not invention. It's similar systems are found in a lot of games, but it's a shit pool system
Hmm.
where you have this bag full of tokens, and you have a token for a single character, which is named. So you have like named tokens for every character in the game, and then you have some zone threat tokens, which you put in the bag,
Hmm.
and then you just shake around and pull one out, and that's the initiative. But there's some more layers to this because you can manipulate the initiative by uh, choosing to be in Overwatch instead. You have some mutations that can manipulate the bag and so on. But in effect, I think this what this make is a game that's really quick playing. It keeps you kind of in the loop all the time. You're constantly kind of engaged because the initiative bounces back and forth. Um, I find some games where you have this I go, you go, and you move like I move my 10 dudes, you move your 10 dudes.
Hmm.
Uh, Especially in multiplayer, it takes too long time for every single player, so you kind of zone out. So this system keeps everyone engaged and keeps the pace quick.
Oh, nice.
I think it really sings in play actually. So I would say the initiative system, yeah.
Oh, that sounds really good. I always love a unique initiative system, and I agree with you. As someone who's tried to play Warhammer 40K with 3 people,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
doesn't
exactly.
work.
Yeah, no, no, no. I mean, it has its place in some games. I think it sometimes it's not necessarily bad. I go, you go, but I think it's all depending on what kind of game experience you want to kind of
Mhm.
focus on.
No, and I think for the style game, it definitely is a perfect marriage. Like for one, like I can't think of really any multiplayer skirmish games that are actually meant to be played with more than 2 people. So that alone.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I find it strange because there's lots of people that play skirmish games multiplayer, but they play, in conventions, people play up to 10 players and so on. But most often it's small hobby rules. And I think it's a very fun and social way to game. So I think the more the merrier almost.
Yeah, no, I agree. And
Although
oh, go ahead.
we kept our game to 4 players, but
There's nothing saying that you can't add some more people.
no, 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 you probably can.
Yeah. So for anyone who is more of an experienced wargamer, what
Hmm?
would you say to bring them into the fold of playing, especially if they've never really played any RPGs? What would entice them to come and play?
I think first of all, there's an interesting, crossover with the RPG. So the setting is, full of depth, and you could always, there's lots of stuff going on. There's a meta plot going on even in this game that we continue kind of the story from the RPG in the campaign in this game. So there's lots of world building that could be interesting for someone coming from a more like rules based perspective. I think Mostly, I think if you want to have a quick playing multiplayer or two playing game where you have a small model count and you have lots of narrative, I think that's why you should go for this game. I mean, it's a game where you create stories instead of a game where you kind of build lists and try to outsmart your opponent, which you of course do in this game as well. You don't build lists, but you try to win and you have tactics and so on. But I would say the narrative element and the world building is probably the two things that might stand apart from some of the competition.
Oh, nice. And it sounds like especially since it's based off the Muting Year Zero rules, um, would you say like how long would you say a normal game would actually take to play?
It's dependent on you can switch around some parameters, but I think a two-player game it's like 45 minutes, an hour maybe. If you play a full four-player game, it could be between 1.5, maybe 2 hours tops. Might go quicker than that. It's very dependent on, I mean, how quick the players are and so on. But it's pretty quick moving once you get started in it. And when you play four players, you most often play with like three dudes per team. So it's not that many. It's just 12 miniatures on the board then. So it's pretty quick playing in that sense.
Mhm.
You can of course play with more figures, but then the playtime increases.
You could turn it into a war game and
Obviously,
have 20 miniatures
well,
each,
you could, but but that's actually another thing that might is a different from a lot of other skirmish games as well, because we wanted to avoid any kind of bookkeeping. So you
Mhm.
don't have any roosters. You don't have a pen. You don't write down what kind of weapon you have. Everything is on the table. So you have cards. Everything is kind of tangible. So your little dude has mutations and has equipment, and those equipment is cards you actually put by that little character sheet. So you have like a total visual representation of what they're carrying around and so on, without having to look at the paper and so on. So it's more board gamey maybe in that sense, than for example Frostgrave or something like that, where you
Yeah.
have. I love Frostgrave, but I mean it's much more. That's much more classic in that you have your a few sheets of paper and
Yeah, I've played a few of that one too, and you do end up having to do list building for sure in that one. Uh,
yeah. So that's why I think our game is a good way to play. It could be a potential good gateway drug. I mean, to play with people that you want to play war games with, and they're not, maybe they're a bit scared away. You could potentially use Zone Wars, because you have these, these cute animals. You have these colorful cards. So we'll see.
yeah. No, no, it honestly it sounds like a lot of fun, and I find a lot of games take themselves too seriously, and I
Yeah.
like that you can tell that this was meant to be more of a lighthearted, fun kind of gameplay. So I gotta ask because you have Andy Chambers on your team for this, and that is to anyone in really the role playing sphere. Most people know about Andy Chambers. What was it like to work with him?
Yeah, it was great actually, and we actually we contacted him because we played a recent game of his, Strontium Dog, which was released by Warlord, I think 5 years ago or something like that.
Mhm.
And when we played that game, we were like, "Oh yes, this is close to what we want to do," because this game, our game, has a lot of DNA in common with Strontium Dogs. You have cards, you have similar initiative systems. It's not identical, and you have this almost cinematic action sequences. So we played that game, we loved it, and I mean, we played Anders designs before, of course. He's done so much Necromunda, of course,
Yeah, of course.
um, and lots of other stuff. So we just reached out to him, and he was really interested. And when we kind of gave him our pitch of what we wanted to do, he was totally on board with that, and he really liked to work with this world and try to bring out the kind of the atmosphere of the world in the mechanics. So yeah, so it's been a really good. We worked with him. He started working on this game I think a few years back, and then we he sent out some drafts. We play tested it. We had some comments back and forth, and this was during the pandemic. So it's been pretty smooth sailing, I would say, to work with him. He's been great to work with, and his experience designing this kind of stuff has been invaluable for us as well, because we're kind of newbies on this area. Uh, so yeah, it's been really good to work with him, and hope to do it again sometime.
Oh, that's that's absolutely awesome. So I have a couple questions for the RPG, but I also have some questions just for yourself. But
Sure.
so while I was talking with my co-hosts and all that, um, they had some questions themselves. For one, what is it like starting up an RPG company that eventually, like, you're almost a household name in the RPG scene? Like, what was that
It's
experience
surreal.
like?
It's super strange. It's I mean it's so strange because like just 5 years ago we were like, we sat like in a basement and we had other jobs. We took all our free time to work on this, and we hoped like one day, maybe not 5 years, 6 years ago, we said we hoped that maybe we could work with this full time, maybe in like 10 years. Just a few years later, and we have moved into a new office. uh, it's going very well. I don't know. It's strange. And it's very fun. It's also it's been a journey. We've done this for 10 years,
Yeah.
and started out as fans to another company. So we kind of were freelancers that started to write fan stuff, and
Oh,
that
nice.
company kind of folded. So they asked us to take over a few games just as fans. So that's why we started Freely.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
Yeah, so the name Freely is actually, I'm not sure if you read Coriolis, the Coriolis game. It's one of our science fiction games.
Mhm.
Free League is one of the factions in the game. So we took that name because we were fans of the original edition of that game. Uh, Now, when we own the game and make the game, it looks pretty stupid because we're calling ourselves as the faction in the game. But what can you do? It's too late to change.
Yeah. No, but like I got would you if you had any advice to anyone who really wants to try and get into the gaming industry, either they have an idea that they want to try and make, what would be
Yeah.
your advice to them?
Sure. I have one. I think the most important advice I would say, and that goes for me too, and that was don't do it alone. Team up with other people. Team up with some other smart persons, and together you'll be so much stronger, and you could do so much cool stuff. Uh, Lots of we were four people that founded Free League, and we have tried other stuff before on our
Mhm.
separate. Well, parts. But when we joined up and kind of found that synergy, I mean, it was so much more powerful. And I see lots of people, freelancers, I see game designers, and a lot of them are really, really good. So some prefer to work totally alone, and that's fine. But I would say that a mistake some people do is just sit at home by yourself and write on your kind of dream project for several years, and just kind of think that an idea or like is enough. You need more than that. You need to kind of you need other people's expertise, I would say. So team
Mhm.
up.
Yeah,
Use the collective force of people. That's the number one tip, I would say.
that is definitely a good tip. As someone who's worked mostly independently on his own, just come up with ideas before scrapping them, that is really good advice even for myself. Like, thank you very
Yeah.
much. That's that's very
No, but
helpful.
it's for me personally. I mean, it was a surprise for me because I tried lots of different stuff in related, road stuff and so on. It went okay, but it didn't really take off anywhere. So it just makes it much more powerful. But then again, it's not easy as well. You need to find the right group. You need to find like-minded people. Um,
Hmm.
but I think that's a good start. I think another tip I would say advice is to probably find something you like, a game or a setting or something, write for it, and become knowledgeable about it. Uh, if if you want to kind of get noticed in the business, because you can start writing content. I mean, a lot of our freelancers are people that started out as fans to
Yeah.
us, and we started out as fans to the old company that folded. So I mean, starting out as having this like as enjoyment and something you dream about and something you just love doing is often a good way to become more professional about it later on.
No, that that's very true, and thank you very much. For Actually, I got one that I think if my one of my co-hosts Scott, if I didn't ask, he might be a little upset. How
Mm.
did you guys got so many big IPs? How did you like you got what was it Alien, the One Ring?
Yeah.
How did you
uh,
guys grab those? So it seemed like almost effortlessly. I'm sure it wasn't, but those are
it
some
is
big
actually a
ones.
bit of a. I can tell you the story. It's a bit of it was a bit of a fluke. It was a bit of planning and a bit of a fluke. We actually had a meeting like 4 years ago, I think it was, where we at the restaurant, and we made like a list, like what's the three IPs we would like to work with, because back then we were kind of looking for to work with a new, an established IP.
Hmm.
We made a list, and at the top of that list was Alien, and the second place was Blade Runner. Um, and we were like, yeah, but that's not never going to happen. We thought, but it was a cool thing to do. But then, like 1 week after, my colleague, he just met a friend of his, or ex-colleague of his, that told him that he knew a guy in Hollywood who works as an agent, and wanted to kind of come in contact with us. This
Oh.
was because we had made Tales from the Loop that won Ennis back in 2017, I think it was. Um, so my colleague had a meeting with this guy, Joe, it's called, and since then we've been working with him, and he's been really good at negotiating this and having this these contacts and everything. So it was a combination of we had this kind of goal we did, and then just a total random chance meeting where we met this guy who knew this guy who was the total right person for us. So that's what.
Well, that's definitely as you said earlier in the podcast, embracing the chaos, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yes, I mean it's a lot about, and that goes for our company as well. It's a lot about timing, and I mean, of course, skill. That's, you need to have that, but it's a lot about timing and being at the right place at the right time. For
Yeah.
us, it was a matter of timing. The Kickstarter boom, which started for like 6-7 years ago,
Yeah.
and that really opened up the TTRPG space internationally.
Oh, it
Um,
definitely did.
so I mean, have we started the company maybe 2005? I'm not sure at all. I think it wouldn't have gone as well.
Yeah. You capitalize on the perfect timing. Like,
Yeah, and that was kind of random. I mean, it was there, and we tried it. It was no grand plan really.
the stars are definitely aligned for that. So just because I know you have another meeting right after this, you're
Yeah.
very very
Yep.
busy. Um, if anyone wanted to either look at any of your guys' work or wanted to contact you in any way, how would they be able to do so?
Well, obviously, our website, freeleaguepublishing.com, is where we have, our games and stuff. And but we also have our website. No, sorry, our Facebook page, Instagram and Twitter, Free League Publishing, on all these places.
Mhm.
You can also find me on Facebook, Nils Karlen. which is my personal account. But we can always shoot an email to Free League. We read everything we get. We try to answer everything. I'm not sure we always succeed with that. We get a lots of emails, but otherwise, I would say the best way to talk to people in the business is actually to go to like a convention
Mhm.
and talk to people, because we go there and that's where we really talk to people playing the games, and meet freelancers and so on.
Oh yeah.
So Gen Con, PAX, and so on.
And there's me in Canada in the middle. There's nothing for me
Yeah,
here.
we actually had a small team in, I think it was Shut Up and Sit Down in, I think it was Vancouver,
Oh, nice.
recently. Yeah. So but that was people from the US. So I think, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And if anyone's curious
Mm.
about the Kickstarter or Free League's website, it will be in the description of this episode, that's for sure. Um, I'd like to thank you so much, Nils, for hopping on with me. I'm glad that you decided, hey, I'm going to do this dumb jingle with me. With Santa, like,
Yeah, but I mean, thanks for having me, and it's fun chatting. Fun chatting with someone in Canada as well. Modern technology and everything.
oh, yeah, I know it's amazing what you can do over the internet nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And to anyone, if you want to either contact me, you can contact me at rpsmartpeople@gmail.com. If you hated this episode for some odd reason, you can always tweet at me at Twitter at rpsmartpeople. And you can also hop into our Discord to chat about this, about, you know, muting your zero, because I'm starting to get more and more obsessed about it as I talk to you, Nels. And on
That's
that,
great.
yeah, backed. And on that note, have a great day and see you guys next week. Bye bye.